Power, attack speed, and crit are three stats that, when you put them together, can deal some great damage potential. On some heroes, or carries, they are really dependent on these three stats to fulfill their function. On fighters, however, and tanks as well, it depends on what you kind of want and what you are going for. In this video, we're going to show you and kind of talk about how these three stats play together in terms of giving us the most damage output. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a Paragon Guide. I am Sylphin. So here we're going to talk about the carries, as these are our attack damage carries that are meant to deal damage. These heroes, their primary function is to deal attack damage over a period of time. Some of them can have a little bit more burst potential, but the whole primary function of these heroes is to deal sustained high damage output. So we want to have as much damage output as possible throughout the entire game. No matter how much total CP we have to spend on our cards, we want to deal the most damage as possible. So here before you is a whole bunch of information regarding our carries, Grim all the way through Yin. Now what these graphs and numbers are showing us is the highest DPS at all times. So if you have 1 CP, how much DPS, or what is the maximum DPS, and what stats do you get at that point? So you can see here that, again, all of this stuff is in the video description down below. You can take a look for yourself on this Google Doc. Now you can see that all the carries start off by going into power, about 10 CP of power, because that increases their DPS the most. Then after that, they start getting attack speed. Why not crit? Crit is simply too chancy. It's a chance, and when you average out those chances, you need a high amount of crit to deal sustained, reliable damage. And that's why the math simply doesn't say to go into crit. Plus, you need that crit bonus to give you 100% more damage when you crit in order to really get value out of that. So you can see that a lot of them here start going into crit, or start going into attack speed, pardon me, until they reach a point where trading power and attack speed for crit actually deals more DPS. And as you can see, that's about the 38-37 mark for a lot of these carries. Revenant, Twin Blast, and Yin as well are different in this regard. You can see that the ratio of power to attack speed here for these carries is pretty much a 2-to-1. 2 power for every 1 attack speed that you get. Of course, that first 10 or 11 goes into power first, though. Now, after this point, you can see that you actually need about 44 to 48% crit chance immediately. You need to drop power, you need to drop attack speed, get your crit bonus, which isn't included here, and crit chance all of a sudden. The transition is very sudden, and it's very interesting and fun to build that into your deck and kind of figure out how to do that. You can see 44 to 48% crit chance you need just like that, and it is very interesting. After that, you need to just increase your power, attack speed, and crit chance in order to reach your final deck. Now, interestingly enough, there is, I think, much more attack speed than people realize in some people. People like Sparrow here, she needs very little attack speed actually. But for others here, there is more than I think a lot of people realize, especially on Twin Blast. He is a bit different. He can be played more bursty, which synergizes more with power, but simply put, the math says for optimal DPS to actually go with a lot of attack speed, as you can see here. Now, one carry that's very, very different, it is Revenant. Because he has maximum attack speed at all times, he doesn't really scale well with attack speed, so it only affects his reload. You need a ton, and I repeat, a ton of power. Take a look at this, 48 CP into power before finally transitioning into just a wee bit of crit. It is quite interesting. There's a whole other video on that of why 100% crit is actually pretty good on Revenant. Whole other video, go check that out. Just know that Revenant likes a lot, and I repeat, a ton of power before going into crit. So to recap, all carries need about 60 power before going into attack speed. Twin Blast Wukong, or a little bit less at 6 to 7 CP. The transition into crit requires 144 power and 66 attack speed before going into a minimum of 44% crit chance plus your crit bonus. Grim, Twin Blast, Yin are slightly different, with Twin Blast being the most different. Revenant is obviously on his entire own different thing. At least 90 power and 38.5 attack speed is needed after the transition into crit. Again, Twin Blast and Yin differ slightly. While slotting power, attack speed, and crit evenly after transitioning into crit is optimal in terms of the DPS, getting more crit, though, will increase the reliability of your damage output. So as you can see, when you go into crit finally, you actually upgrade power and attack speed and crit evenly in order to increase your DPS optimally, but that reliability of increasing crit is really, really good and really nice. So that is something that you need to consider. So that was the carries. They are much more focused on dealing damage, optimizing their decks down to the CP. What about fighters? So in this case, we're talking about all the people here that have a color code to their name. Now, huge disclaimer about this whole entire thing. These heroes are much more wishy-washy and not too exact as carries. They perform a different function besides Kallari, who is an assassin, who's supposed to deal damage. All of these heroes here, besides Kallari, are the most meta way to play them is a bruiser, a brawler with tankiness and utility. They do their thing and then just kind of be a sustained presence, bringing utility for their team. Optimizing their stats for DPS is not necessarily what you should do or what works very, very well. However, that still said, I simply want to show you the relationship between power and attack speed on these heroes, simply because crit is simply not viable. You can't put enough CP into tankiness and then go into crit with the little CP you have left for damage. Simply can't work for these heroes, although I will show you, if you want to go into crit, what to do so. So for these heroes, Crunch here, he likes power the most, and this is his relationship here. A good amount of power here, 8 power before going into various levels of attack speed, although he does end up liking attack speed. You can see here that it is 11 and 15. A 2 to 3 ratio between attack speed and damage, meaning for every 2 attack speed, you get 3 damage. His basic attacks here very interesting. Again, down here, 14 to 20, a 3 to 4 relationship between power and attack speed. Very interesting. Chimera and Grux, they like attack speed a little bit more. They rely on it for a little bit less power scaling and their basic damage. They're a little bit different, as they kind of like attack speed a little bit more as they follow their optimal DPS curve. Now, Greystone, Fengmao, and Kallari are a little bit different. They're a different color. They simply kind of rebound between the green and yellow lines here. They kind of switch. They kind of follow the green, and then they'll follow the yellow. They're kind of in between. Why I haven't shown that to you is A, it would look messy, but B, the difference is very marginal. Less than 2%, sometimes 1% difference between a stat here and there. So when you compound the fact that you're not necessarily wanting to optimize for optimal DPS on these heroes, and the fact that it's marginal either way, I'm simply giving you a rough estimation of what their optimal stats are. Now, Aurora, Kwang, Rampage, and Sevarog, different color. They like attack speed even more than Chimera and Grux. So they'll follow the green line, but then they'll go into attack speed a little bit more. So they like their attack speed a lot. They really, really do. However, somebody like Aurora and Kwang and Sevarog, they can really build on the power for their abilities that do a lot of damage. So in essence, guys, to summarize for the fighters, they put a lot of CP into tankiness, into utility to be a very useful member of the team. Plus, on top of that, a lot of them really like going into a lot of power. Aurora, she's kind of like a melee caster, so she synergizes much better with power than attack speed. Same with Kwang, Sevarog, even Grux, even Chimera, and even Crunch. Almost all of them really synergize well with power. The burst from Feng Mao, the burst with Kalari even, although she's a pure damage dealer. Greystone, almost, and Rampage are probably the two heroes that can actually optimize their DPS and get away with it. Rampage, incredible sustain with his ultimate. Greystone, again, incredible sustain with his ultimate. Those are kind of almost the two heroes that benefit the most from optimizing their DPS. The others, you can simply go into just a ton of power and some attack speed in order to play them the most meta. Now, if you want to go into crit on your fighter, this is what you use. This is what you use here, my optimal DPS calculator, in order to kind of just figure that out. Kalari, she can go into crit. It takes a really long time for her to come online, which is why pretty much people just build power and a little bit of attack speed on her. It is possible. The only difference between fighters and carries is that fighters rely more on attack speed than their carry counterparts. You can see Kalari here, 14 CP into attack speed. Fighters rely more on their attack speed due to their more poor power scaling. So somebody like Kalari here, somebody like Chimera, you'll see lower DPS and a higher reliance on attack speed. Almost as much attack speed as power. Again, due to their poor power scaling and the less attack speed they get per hero level, they really rely on attack speed and crit chance to up their DPS. So if you want to do that, you simply use the calculator and do that. Simply know that they just rely more on attack speed to increase their DPS than carries do. So there you guys go. We talked about how carries are supposed to focus on their sustained damage output, and fighters, they're meant to do another thing. Good amount of tankiness and utility with a little bit of, with the rest of the stats into power and attack speed, usually focusing more on power to increase their burst and their abilities that do great things. If you are building crit on your fighter though, just know that they're basically the same as a carry, just 25 to 50% more attack speed than you see for their carry counterparts, with more into crit and attack speed than that. So there you guys go. That is the relationship between power, attack speed, and crit for all of these heroes. Hopefully this gives you a little bit more insight into how to build your decks and kind of optimize for the most DPS and to help fulfill your role as a fighter. If you have any questions at all, please leave them in the comments, as I promise I will try my best to answer and help you guys out. If you have any insights as well on top of what I have here in this video, leave them down in the comments. So I would really appreciate you helping out the community as well. Hopefully guys, this answers your question, and thank you very much. Please like this video if you like it, dislike it if you dislike it, share it with the community, and of course, guys, subscribe. If you guys like this content, especially if you found it useful, please subscribe so I can do it for you in the future. If you would like to support me and what I do on a regular basis, please consider going over to my Patreon account where you can make a monthly pledge to support what I do and reap some pretty good rewards. Till next time, like always, guys, stay optimistic and positive.